Richard lives in London and New York City. So welcome, Richard. Is this wouldn't be, and the book isn't even out yet. I think it's coming out October 10th. Am I correct?
It comes out in October 12th in the UK, and I think it's slightly later in the US. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not
I
even
feel like
out
a
yet.
male imposter in this session today. I've snuck in through the back door.
No, not at all. What I was going to say is, are we lucky enough to be one of your very first author events?
I've done a few, but the main book tour kicks off in about 2 weeks. Yeah, but it's the first online one I've done.
Okay, exciting, thrilling. I'm going to read about Richard's first novel, Geneva, and then ask him to tell us about it. A Nobel Prize winning scientist has started to show the same telltale signs of Alzheimer's disease that her father is experiencing. Memory loss, even blackouts. So she's reluctant to be the guest of honor at a prestigious biotech conference until her husband, also a neuroscientist, persuades her to go. The technology being unveiled at this conference could revolutionize medicine forever. More than that, it could save Sarah's life. Richard. Well, first of all, thank you, Richard, for the old-fashioned. That's the recommendation I got from Richard. Yeah, no, I think I'll take it right on screen. Tell us about Geneva.
So Geneva came about because the company that I do a lot of recording for, Audible, had figured out that a lot of crime thriller was doing very well for them, particularly when I read it. And it was the type of work that I'd been doing as an actor. And they actually asked me if I'd like to write something for me to read. And of course, I leapt at the chance. And then the next thing they said to me was, do you want a ghostwriter? And I said, absolutely not. If I'm going to read this with my own voice, I will write every single word of the book. And then they got really scared and said, can you present us with some writing samples and some story ideas and a full breakdown of the story, which I started to do. It was just as we were entering the pandemic. I was on stage doing Uncle Vanya at the time, and I was watching a lot of footage of Sarah Gilbert, who was one of the pioneering virologists who had developed the AstraZeneca vaccine, and I was looking into actually developing the life rights to tell her story as a TV show. But I thought I would use somebody of her intense intelligence as the basis for a character that we would put through a stress test by throwing her at the center of a crime where she is forced to doubt her own mind in a situation where she's being gaslit by her husband. And she believes she has Alzheimer's when that is not the case. And so I sort of investigated all of the things that I love about crime drama, the Alfred Hitchcock style, David Fincher, Orson Welles. I'm really interested in science fiction that's close enough to be science fact. So I looked a little bit at what Elon Musk was doing with his Neuralink and sort of chose to call mine Neuracell because I think some of the some friends that I have whose parents were suffering from Alzheimer's were doing kind of endless research into what was on the horizon in terms of breakthrough drugs or breakthrough technology. And so I just poured all of those things that I'm fascinated into a crime drama set in one of the most spectacular locations I could think of, the mountains of the Alps around Geneva, because it's a place where a lot of biotech institutes set up, and it's a really interesting place. I visited there a lot, so it was part destination thriller, part sort of James Bond-esque crime.
That's a fascinating origin story. I think all the emerging writers out there, and we usually have a lot in our audience, must be very intrigued by Audible coming to you and then sort of getting scared. And is it a little bit like having to read for an audition? Like they wanted to make sure you could write.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I guess it was a bit of an experiment on everybody's part, myself included, because I'd written for characters. Whenever I've created a character for screen, I write a lot of biography, and there's sort of a storage container full of all my books, and I usually write in first person. So I knew I could write. It was often free flow and never for anybody else to read. So I did have to sort of think, well, what is your style going to be? What's your voice? What's your signature? But I did want to put a woman at the center of the story because, and that was something that Audible were nervous about, because they were obviously wanting, my voice to be featured, but I was just interested in this one particular woman of extraordinary intelligence.
Yeah.
So that was another equation that they were they found hard to get their head around.
Yeah, I bet. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the female characters threading throughout all the author's releases. So let's hear about them. Richard, let's move on down and tell us about Sarah, who's in a fine pickle and is a very, highly intelligent and lauded person.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested in, what brings two people together in their early courtship was this scientific brilliance that both characters had. Daniel was attracted to Sarah's extraordinary brain, but as they've matured together, her success has sort of outshadowed his, and she's gone on to win a Nobel Prize. And he's celebrated her success, but somewhere in him there's been this sort of kind of eating away inside, that he's been unable to sort of handle the fact that his wife is more successful than he is. And it's sort of manifested itself in him sort of sabotaging her by sort of destroying her in a way, because he's drawn to he's trying to better himself by sort of bringing her down. And it was partly to do with relationships that I've observed in other people, and what happens when that is the case for a man. And it was controversial, I suppose, to make Daniel sort of flawed and weak, but I didn't for one second think that was a problem. I think I think this happens. I think it's very difficult for men to sort of live in the shadow of a much more successful woman. I just was playing around with that idea.
Yeah, I think there's probably some writing couples that, that can speak to that as well. And yeah, that's fascinating. So, okay, moving on down the line, Karen, Val, obviously, is a very strong character. Okay, Richard, so I don't know, we writers, I think, often talk about the other side of the pond, not in the British sense, but in the Hollywood or the New York or the movie sense, but the London stage sense, all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how one translates to the other, or maybe it doesn't, how the two businesses compare and contrast, or anything you'd like to talk about.
It's interesting, listening to everybody else's way into storytelling, because for me, that's what it always was. As early as I can remember, I was an avid reader, and I sort of lived in the books in my imagination. And I think it's where I realized I was an actor. So my way into authoring is really from the inside out, from imagining myself as character and developing character, and seeing writers and producers develop character for long form television and also for theater, and seeing that kind of emotional exchange when you're standing on stage telling a story through the actual eyes, voice, and body of the person that's in the story, the living manifestation of a character, which I have taken for granted, I think, when it came to writing. But in answer to your question about the differences between the British and the American, North American, whatever, I think, we've always had a respect for the author, and certainly in terms of theater and TV, that you don't change a single word, a single sentence, a single comma. You don't improvise these words. There's a slight difference. There's a slight more kind of respect for certainly TV writers and staff writers. You give them, like, I'm developing projects at the moment, and I've got a writer on board who's quite new to the game, and I want to make adjustments, but I have to let her do it. It's which I appreciate, because we've all got to be able to sort of find our way through. But I believe everybody is a writer. Everyone has a story somewhere in their head. It's just finding a way to tell it, really.
Yeah, I think I believe the same. Everybody does have a story to tell, right?
Many.
Right. Very interesting. So, Karen, your background, school teacher, am I right? So, Richard, would you please read us an excerpt from Geneva?
Yes, I will. So, this is a scene where character of Sarah is being drugged by her husband, and she's being interviewed But the interviewer is trying to get something out of her that she doesn't want to reveal. Story of my life. Terry remains still, but her image appears to waver in the distance. I puff my cheeks out from the heat of the fire. My face is burning, yet I'm cold. The discussion continues, a regurgitated cut and paste of other interviews, Googled and rephrased. No follow-ups. Each question just posed one after the other, like she's not even listening, just ticking boxes. Her silhouetted shape across the room moves in and out of focus, undulating like a snake. A distant voice, then two voices in conversation, speaking simultaneously, overlapping, discordant and jumbled. Then her voice is suddenly loud and clear as a bell. Is your diagnosis what caused you to black out at the Schiller Institute last night? My eyes snap open. I'm sorry? I sit up in my seat. Are you okay? Her voice is distant but soft. We can leave things there if you're not feeling well. She stops the tape. I open my mouth to speak, but no thoughts are in my head. No words form. My mouth is open and I can feel saliva trickling onto my lower lip. She stands to leave, pausing at the door as she slides her phone into her bag. It really was an honor, thank you. You've given me everything I need. The room tilts slowly, the floor lurching up sideways to become a wall, yet the crystal glasses on the table remain still. The pictures on the walls don't move. Terry stands in the doorway, frozen. I need help, but she just turns and walks slowly away. I black out.
That would be a terrifying experience. Thank you, Richard. Karen, can we go on to you? And would you please read us from Beneath Dark Waters? And now let us turn for some questions. Chris, do you want to kind of call out a few randomly, or how would you like to do this?
Sure. I actually gathered them because I was like, oh my heavens, there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
There are some for everyone, and there are quite a few for Richard. I am going to combine some of them because some of them are similar. One of the questions was, how did you come up with Alzheimer's and dementia, seeing it's such a complex situation? And do you have a personal connection to that, or is it just for the plot's sake of the book you had in mind?
No, I have two friends whose parents have been suffering from dementia. One of them's no longer here, and I didn't go in too strong on that. I just spent a lot of time listening and hearing the anecdotes that they were telling me about their loved ones, and I just thought it was a terrifying condition to not be able to trust your own mind, particularly in a younger person. So that was one of the reasons that I chose Alzheimer's.
Okay, great. And then another question for one of your characters, Geneva, was his love of skiing the reason you chose? Was your love of skiing the reason you chose Geneva for your?
Of course he did.
It was, yes, it was one of the reasons why I'd been to Geneva, but also there's a scene in the story where Daniel has a really quite bad skiing accident, which is based on a true event in my own life. So yeah, I used that.
And are you doing a sequel to that story?
I'm writing a second book at the moment, which is not related, but I did write a treatment for a second book because I'm just not finished with my central character of Sarah. I wanted to see her in a more on a more solid foundation, in control and in kind of her power in a way. So yeah, I've got plans to write a second book.
And I have one last question just for you, and then I'm going to move to everyone. Okay. Did any of the characters you play in so many of the shows and movies inspire plots for you and in your books?
Yeah, all of them, in a way. I can see which projects I was working on at different times in the book. I was filming Stay Close when I started, and I was filming Obsession when I was doing the final edits. And I feel like there's little kind of capillaries that flow between all of the characters. Just things rub off on you, and I just let it into the writing. I think once your creative floodgates are open, you've got to let it live.
Great. Okay, thanks. So then for all of the authors, people want to know, on a lighter note, how many cups of coffee or tea are needed, or how long would you say you work on average on your current books? And who pushes you to keep going? Is it just your love of the writing, or is there actually something like a deadline, or I mean, a deadline inspires me at times, but what's your biggest inspiration?
So Richard, as a debut, I don't know, is your process going to change, or what got you Geneva on the page?
Like many of the authors I've met over the last few months, and everybody here as well, I have a day job. So I've written on red-eye flights. I've written in hotel rooms in Spain and Madrid when I was on location. I've written in the back of a car. I've written in a Winnebago when I'm waiting to film. But and on a Sunday as well, I use my Sunday morning. But I agree about that witching hour. I love writing late because it's like the world goes quiet and everything comes alive. But I love that thing where you just start and then you look at your watch and sort of 6 or 7 hours has passed and you've just disappeared somewhere. I think it's one of the best feelings in the world.
So here's a follow-up question on that order. Are you guys, just very quickly, do you plot or do you just write stream of conscious and put it on the page?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, coming from long form television where you see shows fall apart or them come together, I knew that I had to write a watertight outline from beginning to end, every chapter with a small sentence of what was going to happen and how, and that gives me the confidence that I can write over a long period of time. So that's the way I did it the first time.
Kind of the lost phenomenon of TV.
Yeah, exactly. Winging it don't work.
Karen?